So the reason why I want to speak here today is because I really, really believe in LifeUps and in building games with the help of your community. And I think with this approach, this was one of our key factors on how we were able to achieve the downloads and the player numbers we got. So it's cool to be here at QUO VADIS, cool to be the opener for the LifeUps Summit. And before I talk too much about myself, let's start. So actually, we founded a company out of university. We studied in Karlsruhe. We met there as a co-founding team. And as many of you, or some of you might know, we didn't start then the company here in Berlin, but moved here 1.5 years ago, roughly. And the reason for that is because we really believe in Berlin as a company, as a city to build a company and to build especially a gaming company. We like the ecosystem here. It's cool that we have conferences like QUO VADIS here. And in the end, we found our home as Kolibri Games here. Quick info on who we are. So we have two games, Idle Factory Tycoon and Adelman Tycoon. Adelman Tycoon is the bigger game with around like 60 million downloads, and with Idle Factory Tycoon with roughly 10 million downloads. And in the end, together, both games have around 10 million monthly active players. This means that 10 million individual people open one of both games every single month. Now, let's talk a bit about why we are here and what we believe are the biggest challenge. So as you probably all know, games are really hit-driven. This means sometimes you find a game and it really works out, and sometimes you work so hard, you think you made everything right, but in the end, just nobody wants to play that game. And this is, I think, one of the biggest challenges in the gaming industry, and this is why I believe that the lean approach is the right approach in the end. Because, of course, you need to find out what works and what doesn't as fast as possible, and hopefully before you spend 5 million euros and 3 years on it. And this is why we use the lean approach. Now, you probably heard that before. The lean isn't such a new word. It's used in many other areas as well. But what we found really hard was how to actually use the lean approach in game development. Because it's a bit different there than services or than websites where you can just change things on the go. With games, you really need to think about how to adapt to the lean approach. And the answer to that is by building a minimum viable product. This is the example of Idle Factory Tycoon. So in the beginning, we built that game that just had boxes. And surprisingly, it was fun. So we played around with it, we changed some of the numbers, and only when we thought, okay, this is a cool game, this has the potential, we started to continue with it. We added rough graphics so that you can get like an idea on how it's working. We iterated on the graphics. We built some more balancing, some more mechanics. And in the end, we finalized then the UX. Now, the hard part there was to do this within 8 weeks. Because for most games, you have so many ideas, and you really want to add this and add this and add this. And while probably all those changes are good things and make the game better, it's very important to understand that in this stage, in the minimum viable product stage, it is not about building a great game, but it is about finding out whether your game has the chance to survive on the market or not. So remember, don't add many things that work, but keep it focused. And of course, the hard challenge there is to say no to most things. And I really mean this. Like, of course, everybody's like, yeah, sure, we don't have feature creep. We're not going to add this and add this. But once you are in the process, you think like, yeah, maybe let's add this. It costs me half a day, then this, and this. And then a few months are over, and you think like, shit, I didn't improve the game. In our case with Adelman Tycoon, this meant that we didn't have many of the things that people think need to be in mobile games. So for example, we didn't have in-app purchases in the first version, we didn't have proper graphics, and also the game was basically finished and done after 2 or 3 days of gameplay. And this meant, of course, that we were burning through our first users because they deleted the game after a few days once they were finished. And many developers told us, like, we shouldn't do this, we should add in-app purchases to earn some money with it. We should add more levels to monetize them longer. But in the end, for us, again, the important part was to figure out if the game works and not to earn some money or have a lot of players with it. Now, after we released the game after 2 months, we, of course, had to decide how to move on. Is it good enough or not? And for us, the most important metric for that is actually day 1 retention. For those of you who are not out of the gaming industry, day one retention basically means how many players come back on the second day after installing it. So why did we take this measure? The reason for that is because I believe that if you have a game where people come back on the second day, and we didn't have, again, like any push notifications or anything, people just came back into the game because they liked the game. And so this is why we take this as a measurement. And everything else, like day 7 retention, day 30, day 365 monetization, everything else, I believe, can be added later on. But if your game doesn't have a good day 1 retention, then you will not be able to reach a good day 30 retention because everybody left before that. So in the industry, typical games have like a 40 or 50% day 1 retention. With Adelman Tycoon, it was 75%, which means that we had a very, very high number of players coming back to the game. And this was a very interesting point for us because back then we were like still in our student apartment. We never built a gaming company before or anything. We showed that number to other gaming developers, and everybody was like, "This is a really, really, really good number." And some of them told us that we for sure have like some issues in our analytics because this can't be true. But in reality, it was true. And then we knew this is something where it's worth continuing. Now, we had this game. We had like some thoughts about where to go, and then we had to sit down and think about what are we actually going to do. And what we did was inventing in the idle genre and making the idle genre bigger. So as some of you know, there are like adventure capitalist tab titles. There are some idle games out there that are older than our game, and they have a really, really great mechanic. There are games like Candy Crush that everybody's playing, and they are so accessible. It's so easy to start the game. And then there are games like Clash of Clans, where when you play Clash of Clans, you probably play it for years because you invest so much in your base, and you really feel proud of what you did. And our idea was to combine those three, to take the core idle games and the idea behind that of not being able to lose but only winning, add the accessibility of games like Candy Crush with like a broad art style, with gameplay that everybody can play, but also add the longevity of games like Clash of Clans, where you really build up your world. So opposed to some other idle games, in Adelman Tycoon, the game changes. You get new islands, you get new continents, new mechanics. So the longevity is far, far higher. And this is what we set ourselves then as mission after we released the game, and we knew this is going to work. But then, of course, the hard part was getting from that small game that has this high day 1 retention but has nothing else to build a game with a lot of downloads that's really successful in the long run. And the answer for that, for us, was to become a truly player-centric gaming company. And this, of course, can mean a lot of things. Everybody understands something different. Some people think we just do what the players tell us. Some people think it's our goal to get a high rating. But in the end, what this means is to build games that are focused on the player. So we see everything out of the player perspective and not out of our like office perspective where we think we are the greatest people and can do whatever we want. This is the process a bit more in detail on how we build the games to fit to that. So as I said, we start with a very small team. And actually, this is important to start with a small team. We did this with the second game as well, because at some point you could add like 10, 15 people to the project. But I believe it's important to only have a small number. This means, in essence, one person who's responsible for the project, one game designer, one developer, one artist. Because with 4 people, you should be able to build the minimum viable product. And if you add more people, then they just start discussing. Then you try to optimize things. You have discussions on, should I do it this way or this way? If you're the only developer, you just find some way, do it, you're done, and can move on. Now, after then, we, of course, play it. We test it in the company. And then we put it out on the market for external testing. And in the industry, that's usually called soft launching. For us, we did this on Google Play, with Idle Factory Tycoon on Google Play, with another developer account. But with Adelman Tycoon back then, we just released it on both platforms to get real player feedback then in the end. And of course, once this works out, then you see, like, is the day 1 retention good enough? Do you have players actually playing the game? And then starts the hard part of games as a service and LifeUps, where you then really, really need to take the small thing and make it bigger, bigger over years. So for some people, LifeUps just means adding new events, tweaking some numbers, doing one update every few months. But for us, LifeUps means games as a service, which means of course, we have all those events and all those balancing changes and so on, but we really improve the game over time. So if you played Adelman Tycoon like 2 years ago, it's a very different game than what it is today, because we add new mechanics, new content, and completely new areas to the game that haven't been there before. And for us, this is a really important differentiation. So we're not going to push the game out, then put 5 developers on it to just do some events. But we see this as the core game development process, where we start with a small game and then make it big over the years. And with Agile Tycoon, so far we had over 120 updates since we released it. Now, as the ones of you who are in gaming companies know, doing updates is super complicated and sometimes fails. So since we're doing weekly updates, of course, the pressure to do this properly is far higher. And what we did then is to think really agile. So most people or most companies, they develop, then they have somebody looking over it, and then there's QA who tests it, who releases it, and then it starts from the beginning. However, with this approach, it's not possible to do one update per week. So for us, the important aspect there is to actually start QA testing while developing, to start art while developing, and to have everything like synchronized. And with this, then, of course, you need to talk far more, but in the end, like once development is ready, QA is also ready because they tested every step in between, and we can then release the game after 1 week. Now, let's talk a bit more about what this means in practice and some practical tips that you hopefully can use for yourself. So when doing weekly updates, I believe it's really important to have IT support with automation, because in the end, you need to do the same thing over and over and over again. And if you need to build the version every time, to push it on a device manually every time, you will probably not be able or be willing to do weekly updates. So for us, from the beginning, it was important to automate that process with Jenkins, with Git. And then in the end, we tried to automate more and more of the delivery process in the end. This is a lot of time, so I would probably not start with this before you are on the market, but once you know that your game is going to work out, I would put a lot of effort into building a continuous integration platform. Now another technical slide that might be very helpful. So we have like the different text that we use in the different stages. When we started Adelman Tycoon in the first version, we only had Fabric. I think it's going to be integrated into Firebase now. And with Fabric, you can basically see what's the run retention, daily active users, monthly active users, and 2, do you have any technical issues or not? And this was all the analytics we needed in the beginning, because as you remember, it's all about figuring out if the game has the potential to grow and it's worth it to invest more. If you would have implemented all those other things, they are all nice tools, but then we wouldn't be able to release the game after 8 weeks. So this was all when we came to growth stage. So for in-app purchases, we use PlayFab, Ad Mediation, Iron Source, push notification, one signal, and then Cloud Save, again, PlayFab, sorry. And with those tools, we were able to then like build the game properly, have Cloud Save, have like analytics to marketing, like the basic features basically that you need once you have an okay game. And then at some point, probably like a year ago, we came into the third stage, scaling. So once you have all those things, then the game is working, but it's not really growing. So we had Apps Live for attribution, again PlayFab for LifeUps, and Get Social for social, and then Azure for data handling and for personalization. And so data handling and personalization, if you're like in the first 2 stages, you should not think about this, because this is an optimization tool, which is nice to get like 20% more ARPDAU, but in the end, this will not make your game successful. What makes your game successful is building a game that players like and validating that as fast as possible. One other practical tip is the staged rollout. So sometimes you just build an update, you release it, and you see shit, you have a bug in there, and it's destroying the save game for everybody. Actually, we had the story in the beginning, where we then lost a good percentage of our players because we pushed a save game bug. And from then on, we discovered this cool feature on Google Play called staged rollout. And with the staged rollout, you are able to give the new update to a small percentage of players in the beginning and then roll it out step by step. And so with this, we in the beginning released it to 1% roughly. We have around 1.5 million daily active users, so with 1%, it's still 15,000 users. And if you have any super critical bugs, you will see them. Then it goes to 5%, where we then get some more data, where we see if we have more like other serious issues. Once it is at 20%, the player base is big enough so that you can actually ask your players what do they think about the update. Is it a good update or not? And then roll it back if it's not a good update. And only on the 4th day, we fully release the game. And the nice thing about this process is that you don't need to be scared about shipping an update because you know that if there's an issue, it will be caught. So you will not have this pre-release stress where everybody crunches until like 11 p.m. just to get the update done, because you know it's a continuous process and it will not fail. Now, of course, the big question is always, what are we going to do next and where do we get our roadmap and ideas from? And for us, there are basically 3 areas. The first area is community feedback, second area database, and the third area is qualitative decisions. Now, so community feedback is basically what I said. Basically, we're going to listen to our community, then we're going to implement the feature, design it based on them, and in the end, we get the feedback, and we'll then see how it worked out. And in reality, this looks like this. So we have a weekly community presentation where the dev team works together with the community team, and the community team basically shows the dev team what people think about the update and or about the game in general. And this is a really important thing because in the beginning we didn't have this. And I talked to our developers. I was like, hey, all the players are losing their save game. And for them, they didn't really care because they didn't see and feel it. So we implemented the process to try to get the developers very close to our players so that they can see and feel what they like about the game and what they don't like about the game. Second part, database decisions. So many companies operate very data-focused. For us, it's actually something that we're building up these days. And what does data-based mean? This is one example graph of our offers and what people actually buy in the game. And so we analyzed this, we talked a lot about this, but for us then, of course, the challenge with data is always, what do you do with that data? And we really spent some hours figuring out, like, should we change something? And in the end, with this was an example where we built analytics, but we're not able to use it from a data analysis standpoint. On the other hand, if you play the game, you will see what offer feels good and what doesn't. And of course, the third part, some people call it gut feeling decisions, but I think it's far more than that, and it's basically with what we make most updates together with the community, and it is thinking about the game, playing the game yourself, and not trying to overcomplicate things, not analyzing, A/B testing everything, but actually just sitting down, playing the game, thinking about what players in the end will probably like and what they will probably not like. And one good example there was the fourth continent. So we knew we have 3 continents. We played the games ourselves. Everybody was at the end of the third continent. And this was a clear decision that a 4th continent is the right thing to do. And of course, we could have A/B tested it or analyzed it. But in the end, all the analytics behind that would take so much more time and effort than just building it. And in the end, players liked it. Everybody played further. And everybody was happy. So the key message for me in this part with qualitative decisions is to keep things simple. In the end, most things don't need to be complicated. Most players just tell you what they like, and you can just play the game, listen to them, and then base your decisions on that. And most of the times, you will be right with that. So how did this look for us? How did we actually implement those things? As I said in the first version, players just finished the games after a few days because we didn't have enough levels, and people that played intensively basically played through all of it. This meant In the very beginning after release, we just had to add more content. And I had also very interesting lessons learned from me there, because we also, as many game developers, thought like before we then build more content, that players are probably going to want something more complicated, some like super special feature. And we released the game with only one mine. And our idea then was to like add more mechanics inside of the mine and do like complicated things. However, every player that we talked to basically just told us that they want more mines. And this is when it clicked for me that most players don't want a complicated, overthought solutions, but they just want more of what they like. And then if you look at Candy Crush, they have thousands over thousands of levels. And it is because players just want more of what you already built. So retention, we added more mines, more continents. Players liked it, stayed a long time in the game. Of course, we are a company, so at some point we had to earn money as well, because we wanted to hire more people and move out of our student apartment. So we built a shop in the game. I think this is pretty straightforward. And then one thing that had a huge impact was events. As I said, for us, LifeUps and Games as a Service is far more than events. However, events is something that I think every game should have, because it's a very easy way to add refreshing content for long-term players. And with events, this basically means that we have one event mine every weekend, where you then can play a new setting. So sometimes it's like St. Patrick's, Halloween, and so on. And with this, we both increase retention because players come back in the game, but also monetization because players know they only have that one weekend, so they want to finish the game in that weekend and sometimes help with spending. And then one other important thing for us was social light. So we added expeditions in the game and some friends list features. So until this day, we are not a really social game. This is something that hopefully will come this year. But this helped a lot because you can play with your friends, you're inviting your friends, and this just keeps you longer in the game. And then we, at some point, figured out we need more mines. So we added the mainland, where you have like a linear progress of mines, and then super managers, with which we bring the RPG element in the game. Now, why am I telling you this? The reason is because I think it's very important to do the right things at the right time. There are many, many things that you can do with your game, and that are certainly good things, but where it's not the right timing to build it. If we, for example, would have started with social or super managers earlier, we wouldn't have been able to build it properly because it's so much work, and then our players wouldn't have gotten an update for 3 months or so. So in the beginning, it's more important to build the simpler things, just give them more of what you have, and then over time, move on to the more complicated things. And please don't start with the complicated things and then spend multiple months without giving anything to the player. So what's the result of this process? And in the end, players really, really love it. So last time I checked on App Annie, of the top 500 most downloaded games, we are top 10 with the player rating. And I think this is a strong indicator for the player-centric approach really works. So in the end, if you listen to your community, and if you build what you think and anticipate what they want to have, then you are able to build a really, really great game, and at the same time, build a successful and also financially profit-oriented company with it. Thank you. Do we have time for questions, or?
Yes.
Are there any questions?
So we have a small Q&A, so time for 2-3 questions. Yes. Can you hear me? Try. Oh, sorry. My fault.
It's all right.
My fault. Here we go.
Hey, thanks for the talk. I'm wondering, the level of scaling that you have, is that applicable to larger, more complicated games like console games or PC games that might involve 3D modeling?
So I think with idle games, it's a pretty good genre to use the MVP approach because you can add multiple things step by step. However, I think some of the key elements are also applicable to console games. And if you think of Fortnite, for example, they add more and more stuff over their lifetime. And I think this is a good example on how you can build AAA games with a games as a service approach.
Yeah, but they had like 3 years to develop that beforehand when they came out.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.
You mentioned synchronizing different parts of the development, such as QA and in development at the same time. And my question is, because a lot of the work of QA, of quality assurance, depends on development already having been done, how did you accomplish this in a 1-week time span?
So one concrete example, for example, is that in the beginning of the sprint, devs and QA sit together, and in the beginning of the sprint, think about how this feature can be tested. And this is basically when then QA builds test maps and thinks about how to test different things while dev builds the features. And then, for example, the QA starts to test when there's a dev build already there, which is not completely done yet. So dev and QA talk again about what should be working now, what should not be working now, and QA already starts testing that. So of course, in the end, we still have a smoke test where QA tests everything, but this usually takes like 2 or 3 hours, because all the steps in between are already tested.
Okay, thank you.
Who wants the mic?
I think there was one question.
Was it earlier? Anna? I'm sorry.
Thanks. So, thank you for your talk. My question would be, what are you doing in the data-driven aspect of the process? Like, what are you looking at besides day one retention?
And so we are not really data-driven yet. We are more focused on building based on what we get from our players and what we think is good for the players. And we're only building up the data part. So of course, on the marketing side, we do a lot of A/B testing and that stuff. On the game, so far, we don't really use data. This is something that we will build up now. So maybe I can answer you that question in 1 year here.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I would say community feedback is also data, but there's a lot of other data you can look into. Thanks.
Cool. Is there one more question? Yeah.
The last one.
Hi, you said that you base some of your decisions on the opinions of your team, and I was wondering how many people on your team are actually playing the game, and how do you incentivize them to continue doing so?
So I would say like half of the company or so is playing the game, some more, some less, and we don't incentivize them to play the game. So they just play it because they like it. Cool. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel Stammler.